Water turned to blood, right? All over, yeah. Moses and Aaron, they come into Pharaoh once again after being reassured by God of, no, this is the plan, this is what's going to happen in Exodus 6. And they go back to Pharaoh and they say, all right, let us go worship God for 3 days. And what does Pharaoh say? Pharaoh says, no, you're not. You guys are just lazy, right? You're looking for a break. And so then what does Aaron do? What does Moses command Aaron to do? He does what? Throws down his staff, and what does it turn into? A snake. That's pretty awesome, right? That's a cool miracle. But what happens right after that? The magicians, the wise men of Pharaoh, do the same thing, right? They throw down their staves. We see it implies that there's more than one that's thrown down, and theirs turn into snakes. But what does Aaron's snake do to the other snakes? Eats them up, right? And we talked about how that's showing that God is proving his power over Pharaoh and his magicians, right, and his conjurers. Is, look, not only can I create a snake out of a staff, right, but you can too, but my snake will eat your snakes. They're more powerful. And then the next day, right, Moses goes back out to Pharaoh and says, let my people go worship me. And Pharaoh says no. So then, like Jim said, what does Aaron do? Puts his rod into the water, into the Nile, and what does it turn into? Blood, right? And again, we see, what do Pharaoh's magicians and conjurers do? The same thing, right? And that's going to be important. Again, as we talked about Wednesday night, you're going to see this escalation of God's power, right? So far, he's doing things that Pharaoh's magicians can copy, right? Again, as we discussed, how we're not sure, right? There's different theories. We're not told as to why Pharaoh's magicians can do this. But the point is, God conquers them each and every time, right? And that's the main theme of all of this. Thank you, Adam, by the way, for not stealing. Yes? So yes, we see in there, right, it says that the water turned to blood, the river, right, talking about the Nile, and it was out throughout the whole land of Egypt. Now, one thing we did see, though, is did the people go without water? No. What could they do? It says that they dug around it and found water, right? So again, showing God's power, not only can I turn water to blood, but I can limit it, right? I can control exactly where that blood is at. If you dig around it, yes, you'll still find fresh water. But yes, very good point. And again, we're going to get into that as well, about what's affecting Israel and what's affecting Egypt. Yep. Blood. Yeah, everything did. Yeah, exactly, right? If they had stored water already, that turned to blood too. But if you dug around, then you could find water. Yes, very good point. All right. One thing we brought up on Wednesday night too was this idea, and thank you, Adam, again, for not stealing my thunder. I appreciate that, right? Is this idea of it's not just Yahweh, God, the Lord, proving who he is, right, to the Israelites, right? And just, oh, he's doing these random things to make a point, right? Blood, frogs, lice, flies. Why? Because they're cool, I guess. That's why he did it. No, it's each one of these plagues you see directly go after an Egyptian god or gods in most cases. Usually it's several gods he's going after. And here is a list of kind of how they all line up, right? So the first plague, right, we talked about, it goes after Happy, Isis, Khnum, and Osiris was the one we kind of focused on mainly Wednesday night. Why? Because Osiris, according to Egyptian lore, is the firstborn god. And if you remember, right, when God is talking to Moses, he says, what? I'm going to do what to the firstborn? I'm going to kill him, right? Which we're going to see physically. But even when he starts with the plagues, he starts going after the firstborn god, Osiris, the great god, right? One of their great gods. So what we're going to see, again, as we get into this, remember, this isn't just random things God is doing, right? He's not just, oh, I like frogs, come on, I'm going to send frogs. No, these are very specific, very planned things by God, by Yahweh, to show, I am greater than all these gods of Egypt. Now, if you remember in ancient times, how great is Egypt at this time? The most powerful nation in the world is Egypt at this time. Therefore, they have the most powerful what? So-called gods, right? That's the way it worked. How great is your nation? Well, that just means how great your God is, right? So if Egypt is the greatest nation, therefore they have the greatest gods, and God is saying, no, I'm the greatest God among the, quote, right, gods. All right, any thoughts on that? One other thing I want to mention, go ahead and look back at Exodus chapter 5 real quick. Might be asking, well, why would God want to prove himself compared to Egyptian gods? Look at Exodus chapter 5. Let's look at verses 1 and 2. It says, "And afterwards Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, Thus says the Lord God of Israel, Let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, Who is the Lord, or Yahweh, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I do not know Yahweh, neither will I let Israel go." What's the very first question Pharaoh asks when he's told, "Let my people go"? Who? Right? Who's Yahweh? Who is he? Right? That one, he has the audacity to say my people when they're actually mine. They're my slaves. Right? Who is this God that you proclaim? Well, now God's saying, this is me. Right? You asked the question, who I am. I'm going to show you who I am. All right, any thoughts on this before we jump into chapter 8? Awesome. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into chapter 8 then. Let's go ahead and look at the second plague. If somebody could read Exodus chapter 8, verses 1 through 7. All right, perfect. Okay, so what is the second plague? Frogs. Again, right, what's the request that God is making? Then my people go that they may what? Serve me. Again, what's the original request Moses and Aaron made from the Lord to Pharaoh? Yeah, give us 3 days to go out into the wilderness and worship our God. Right? And that is still the same request that he is making. We just want 3 days. Let us go worship our God. And each time Pharaoh says, no. Right? Who's Pharaoh? Or who is God? So the plague is frogs. Why do you think it's frogs? What are frogs to the Egyptians? The fertility goddess, Heket, right? Her image is a big frog with a big belly, right? I guess that means fertility, you know, frogs and, I don't know. Yeah. Right. Hey, I didn't say it, ancient Egyptians, so you can blame them, right, if you get upset by that. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. He's attacking their fertility goddess, right, Heket. And again, imagine this. You're in ancient Egypt. The water's just turned to blood. It's been 7 days since then, right, as we at the end of chapter 7. Okay, the water's now back. God goes in, Moses and Aaron go in to Pharaoh, say, let my people go, and he says, no. Now, are these frogs just going to be along the river like last time? No, where are they going to be? Yeah, it even says on your servants, right? Like, have you ever found a frog in, I don't know, like your front yard? Especially in the middle of the night. Have you ever stepped on a frog in the middle of the night? I have. It's not fun, right? And that's one frog. And he's usually about like this big. in Middle Tennessee, right? They're not the big bullfrogs. Now just imagine everywhere you go, when you lay down in your bed, right, you're going to feel something hopping on you. Yeah, everybody's getting these kind of looks. But that's what God says. This is what's going to happen. And again, so Aaron goes out and he does what? Puts his rod over the river again, right? And out come all these frogs. Everywhere. Just everywhere, right? How many frogs do you think that'd take? This is where all the frogs from biology class came from, yep. We're still cutting up ancient Egyptian frogs. How many frogs do you think this is? Covered the land, right? And again, this is all of Egypt from what we can tell, right? It says the land. There's no limits on this plague. Okay? It's everywhere. Who else can do this magic trick or this miracle? The magicians can do the same thing. Again, kind of the point that was brought up on Wednesday night. When the water turned to blood, if the magicians, these conjurers, were really powerful, what should they have done? What would you have done? Stopped it, right? You would have been like, hey, no, let's bring this back, right? No, they said, hey, look, we can do the same thing. If there's millions upon billions of frogs all over Egypt, what do you think you would try to do? Get rid of them, right? At least in my own house. You know, if I had that power, I'd be like, all right, you frogs can be out here, but not in my house. No, you guys just stay out there. But what do? Just make more frogs, right? Again, going back to this idea of Pharaoh and his magicians will do anything, even if it means hurting themselves, hurting their own people, just to try to prove they're on par with God. Any thoughts about this plague, about these frogs? Yes. Because God told them to? I mean, honestly, that's the best answer I could give you, is because God told them, here's this staff, right, with the burning bush. Take the staff with you. Your brother's going to use it. And even if you see here, right, in... Yep. I guess it's a strength symbol. I know apart from Israel, right, apart from Moses and Aaron, in different ancient kingdoms, right, you had the staff, the rod, the scepter. It was a symbol of power. So I'm sure God is using, their own symbols against them, right? Yep. Sheep. Yeah, Moses and Aaron, right? At least Moses was for 40 years a shepherd. Yep, exactly. Any other thoughts? Very good question, though, yeah. Yep. Yeah, it was just honestly a common thing most people had, and it symbolized it, right? Power, might, authority. Yep, there's always the staff, right? Yeah. And in fact, you even see eventually in the Ark of the Covenant what is in there. It's this Aaron's staff, right? That budded. Yes. Very good question. Any other thoughts? All right. So let's see if this changes Pharaoh's mind. Go ahead and read, somebody, if they could read verses 8 through 15. All right, perfect. Thank you. Okay, what is Pharaoh's initial response to Moses about this? Do what? All right, you win, right? I'll let them go. You go worship like you've requested if you just get these frogs out of my house, right? Out of my land. And what does Moses say? What's his response back? I'll give you the honor, right? Kind of playing a little bit into Pharaoh's ego here, right? Is, all right, Pharaoh, that sounds like a good idea. You know, we'll go ahead and do this. But I'll tell you what, you tell me when you would like this to stop, and I'll go talk to Yahweh, the Lord, and we'll make it stop. You just set the time, and what's the time he sets? Tomorrow, right? Again, I don't know why he says tomorrow. Personally, I would have been like, now, please. But, right, he says tomorrow. So Moses says, fine, perfect, we'll go ahead and do this. Tomorrow comes, and what happens? All the frogs leave, right? They go back to the river, and a whole bunch of them die, right? Question. If God could just make frogs by the millions again, right, come out, why didn't he just make them all disappear? Right? One, right, it's not supposed to be convenient, right? This isn't a, hey, light switch, right? Turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, right? Very good point. Think about this. Verse 14. Again, it's one of those interesting verses that you find in the Bible. What is it like in Egypt at this time? Just reeks. It stinks, right? And in King James, right, it says they gathered them up in heaps. Imagine, you're just a regular, common old Egyptian going to work, right, wherever that may be. You're walking by, there's a mound of frogs, there's a mound of frogs, there's a mound of frogs, and it just smells. What is that going to remind you of? Pharaoh saying no? Yeah. Yeah. Why does it stink? Because Pharaoh decided not to listen to Yahweh, the God of the Israelites. Right? Again, it's not supposed to be a convenience thing. When it becomes convenient, what do we as people tend to do? We just revert back to what we were doing, right? Oh, that's done, that's over with, the hardship's done. I'm good now. Right? No, this is supposed to last. This is supposed to stick, not again only in Pharaoh's mind, but in the Egyptians' minds and in the Israelites' minds. God is proving a point of who he is. Right? And so what's a good way to prove a point? Get it to stink. Right. Yes, Jennifer. Yeah. And Scott just nods his head. Yeah, right. Again, it's one of those things where you're sitting there going like, where's Pharaoh's wife? Where's, like all these men just coming and being like, hey, we're tired of this. Now, we are going to get some people's reaction coming up here in the next chapter. You are going to see a little bit of their reaction, yes.
It's pretty cute that the magicians could do something similar to bring some frogs from water. They could do this. I assume there's a lot more frogs on the land than actually were ever in the Nile.
Yeah.
God had done a miracle here that brought so many frogs to cover this land, and now they've died in place. Everybody's seeing this is unbelievable. How many frogs magicians.
Yeah, exactly, right? Just the immensity, right? I don't even know if that's a word, of this miracle, right? Of just, again, it's not just 10, 20, a couple hundred. We're talking millions upon millions of frogs in the land of Egypt, right? not just, oh, here's some that more than usual came out of the river, right? Very good point. Any other thoughts on this before we keep moving forward? What's Pharaoh's ultimate reaction, though, to all this? Harden his heart, right? Yeah, I'll let them go. You go worship. Hey, they're dead. Sure, there's mounds of dead frogs everywhere, and you can't get that smell out of your mind, probably for the rest of your life. But no, never mind. Why do you think Pharaoh does this? Because you're going to see it over and over again. Yes? Yep. Yeah, exactly right. I told Moses when this is going to end. Right? Again, as we talked about before in this idea of God hardening Pharaoh's heart, it's not that God is saying, you will do this. God is giving him choices and opportunity, but God also knows, if I let Moses play into his ego a little bit, this is how he's going to react. Right? Is I chose when this stopped. Yeah, it may have stopped, but I told God, I told Moses, this is when it will end, tomorrow. Yes? Well, we're not sure how they knew each other, right? We know what we do know is Moses is the old Pharaoh's daughter's stepson, right, adopted son. How this Pharaoh is related to him, we don't know, right? The Bible never tells us. We assume Moses has some sort of weight with him because he is allowed to enter into and talk to him to begin with, right? You usually don't just do that if you're some random guy. Yeah, he knew of Moses. Yep. Yeah, exactly, right? And if you remember, in Pharaoh's eyes, Moses is just some Hebrew, right? He's not anything special. I'm Pharaoh. I'm a god. You don't come to me and tell me what to do with my people. Whether you do it or Yahweh doesn't matter. These are my people. Yes, Tim. Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, how many times, not just people in general, but us in our lives, when we're going through a hardship, when we're going through something that's hard and we cry unto God and we say, please, help me get through this, whatever it may be. And then when that relief comes, in whatever form, we then go, okay, thanks, right? And we just go about our lives and forget God. Yes, Mason, did you have a comment? Yeah, right. Exactly. Anytime it stinks, you're probably thinking, man, do you remember that time? Right? This is not a memory that just kind of comes and goes. This is not a convenience that you forget about. This is going to last. No matter how old you are. If you're a little kid, you're going to remember it. If you're old, you're going to remember the look, the smell, everything. All right. Let's keep moving on. Let's go and jump into the third plague. If somebody could read verses 16 through 19. All right, perfect. Okay. Short little section here, but very important. What's the plague, first off? Gnats, right? Little lice, gnats, right? Depending on your translation. Little annoying bugs. That's what I like to call it, right? Something different, though. First two ones involve the river. What does Aaron do this time? The dust. He actually takes his rod, instead of putting his hand over, he actually takes it, smacks the dust, and then it turns into all these gnats or lice, right? This is, again, looking at the God side of it, right? This is going after the Geb, the Egyptian god Geb. He is the god of the desert, right? How much desert is there in Egypt? All of it, unless you're by the Nile, all of it, right? Again, going after one of the major gods of the Egyptians, right? It's not just, hey, I'm going to take your river and the gods that look over that. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go over the gods that take over the land. I'm going to turn their land into something different, into an annoyance, right? Again, how many gnats do you think there were? Do you think he hits it and there's a couple hundred? You couldn't even count them, right? If you're talking gnats, lights, how big are these bugs? Tiny little bugs, right? Ugh, right? Yeah. I don't know if you've ever been in Arizona in August. You have. Jim has. Cool thing happens in Arizona in August. It's not just hot, but it's also monsoon season. Okay? Before monsoon comes in, right, it usually happens at night. You get a torrential downpour every night. But before that happens, something different happens. A haboob. Does anybody know what a haboob is? Awesome. This is great. I wish I had a picture. But Jeannie does, yes. One person does, because she lived in Arizona with me. It's a giant wall of dirt, of sand, just comes rolling in, basically brown fog, and you can see it coming, right? It just, wind picks up, all that dirt, all that dust just gets caught up in it, and it's just this brown wall comes, and when you're in it, you can't see like 5 feet in front of you. It's just brown. And it lasts until it all blows away. That's what I think of when I hear gnats and dust. It's just this, picture this black cloud of just bugs just comes rolling into Egypt, right? Yeah. It's nasty, right? It's no fun. It's neat to look at, right? You like to stand on your yard and be like, oh, here comes the big brown wall, right? But when you're in it, it's horrible. No, you don't. You don't fly through it. You don't do anything. You just kind of hunker down and try to wait it out. Something different, though, also occurs in this plague. Not only is it now we're in land, not the river anymore, but what do Pharaoh's magicians try to do? They try to do the same thing. Does it work this time? No. Right? God has now escalated, if you will, the punishment. Right? Okay, yes, your magicians, your conjurers could do the same things, and I've proven now that I'm more powerful than that. Now I'm just getting to a point where I'm just going to start doing things that they can't do. Do they recognize this? Yeah, right? They would go, we can't do this. This must be what? What do they say? This is the finger of God, right? They're now acknowledging, at least the magicians are, Yahweh is God, right? He is powerful. He is a deity, right? How far they take that, we don't know, but they're now at least acknowledging He is who he says he is, right? He's no longer, right, some conjurer like us. Any thoughts on this idea of God escalating the plagues here? Yeah, seems like there was no warning, right? Before you've had, go tell Pharaoh, go tell Pharaoh. The third one we just see God tells Moses and Aaron, go out and do this, right? And that could almost be in direct relation to the way Pharaoh acted last time, right? With, oh, I'm sorry, let your people go. No, right? God saying, nope, you want to play these games, fine, no more warnings. I'm just going to do it. Very good point. Any other thoughts? Yes? Of, I don't know. Yes, yeah. He's at least on par. Yeah, he's at least on par with them, yeah. Hopefully that answers your question, right? If you didn't hear, the question was, right, is there a significance behind the word Elohim used here? And from what we gathered, right, from what Adam was saying was, they're at least acknowledging he is on par with their gods, right? Maybe not necessarily the God of gods, but he's at least on par with them, right? And again, if you're Pharaoh and you hear, hey, we can't do this, he's at least a god, what's Pharaoh's reaction? What does it say? It hardens his heart. Why would that harden his heart? Why do you think? Yeah, challenge him. Yes, Ben. Yeah, exactly, right? He's one, right? I got this one, this one, this one. I'm one. Okay, so, yeah, he's on par with me at most, right? We have thousands of them. He's one. Okay, do the numbers, right? Yes, Rick. Yeah. Exactly, right? If he's so powerful, why then are his people still enslaved by my will, by my command? Right? Why doesn't he just let them go? Yes, Brent. Yeah, right. There's arrogance and there's this guy. And then also, too, right, there's power involved. There's authority, right? And people do not like to give up any power, any authority whatsoever if they can help it. Yes. Yeah. Exactly, right? How many times do we get proven wrong in our own lives and we say, well, I'm just going to keep bulling through, right? I'm going to prove that I'm eventually right somehow, some way, right? We will just double down on our mistakes because that means I'm wrong. That means I'm not as strong or as powerful or as whatever I think I am. I'm just going to keep doubling down. Very good. All right, let's keep moving on. Let's go ahead and jump into the next one. If somebody could read verses 20 through 24. Go for it.
Now the Lord said to Moses, rise early in the morning, present yourself before Pharaoh, as he comes out of the water, and say to him, thus says the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me. For if you do not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of insects on you and on your servants, and on your people, and into your houses, and the houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of insects,
Perfect. All right, awesome. What is, again, Pharaoh now gets another warning, right? What's the warning? First off, what's the request that God's making? Let my people go. If not, I'll send swarms of insects, flies, depending on your translation, right? I'm going to just send bugs, right? Yeah, right. Again, we're going to see another escalation. I'm going to do this, right? First off, your magicians couldn't even do the last one. So don't just sit there and act like we're on par. But now what? I'm going to do what? I'm going to separate this plague, right? The first three had affected everybody in the land. You'll see, in the land. This one, though, God says, nope, I'm done with this. I'm going to separate it. Where is it not going to happen? Goshen. Why is it not going to happen in the land of Goshen? That's where Israelites live. That's Goshen, okay? So you have Egypt, if you notice, right? Kind of weird. There's the Nile, it's all green, right? Again, that's the way Egypt is. By the Nile, it's very fertile, okay? And then you have up in the northern part what's known as the Nile Delta. That's where the Nile River actually goes and splits off in a bunch of different little streams and rivers and things like that, up into the Mediterranean. Down in like the southeastern part of it is what they call the land of Goshen. Does anybody know how Israel got into the land of Goshen? Joseph, right? That's where Joseph went to. That's where his brothers lived, right? Or his sons lived, and Joseph's brothers lived, yeah. And they gave him that land, right? Yeah, is that land of Goshen. And they said, this is where you may dwell. Well, now this is where these millions of Israelites dwell, is in the land of Goshen. Right? Very good land to be in. And so that's where they're at. Okay? God says, I'm cutting it off. In this map, do you see, and if you actually even look at topographical maps, do you see anything that would prevent a swarm of flies or insects from going into that land? No. Did they have like glass walls around it that, reach miles high? No, right? Again, God is proving, not only can I affect a whole land, but I can affect a land and protect a section of it. He gives a reason why, though. He says, my people are there, and what? That you may know in verse 22. How does he end that? That I am the Lord in the midst of the land, or of the earth, right? That you not only know that I am Yahweh, but I am Yahweh who is right here. Yeah, there's a difference between my people and your people. Did you have a comment, Josh? Oh, I thought you were. Bad peripheral vision. Sorry about that. Any thoughts, ideas on this idea of just massive swarms of flies, of insects, and God separating his people from the Egyptians? Yep. Yeah, and it's interesting, right, is you look at that and you say, well, then why would God allow it to affect his people in the beginning, right? Again, what is God trying to prove? Is he only trying to prove this to Pharaoh? No, his point is, I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to prove it to your people. I'm going to prove it to my people. Because again, how long has it been since God's talked, as far as we know, to any of their leaders? Who's the last one that we know of before Moses? Joseph, right? It's been hundreds of years since they've really heard anything that, again, as far as we know, from God. And all of a sudden, God comes back on the scene and he says, I am Yahweh, your God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And here, let me prove it to you. Yes, Mason. Yeah, exactly, right? Very good point, too, is not only can I do this, but I am your protector. if you are with me, if you are in my land, I will protect you. I will keep you safe, right? And that's going to be very important as they go through this journey of wandering in the wilderness, conquering the land, right? Again, God is setting up some things that are going to last for hundreds and thousands of years into the future. It's not just a, hey, I need to get my people out, let's do this and get out of here, right? Any other thoughts? Yes? Yeah. Yeah, again, we're not told, right? Yeah. You have both these going on at the same time, right? It's just, all right, you got little gnats that are annoying you. Okay, now let's up the bug count, for lack of a better term, right? We're never told that he takes them away. We all kind of assume it, right, just because of the way everything else goes, but you're right. Scripturally, we're never told he takes them away. All right, yes? No, and that's a very good thought, right? And I think the greater point in what you said there is, right, is God is telling Israel, I am setting you apart, right? And you see him later, again, when he's giving the commands, is when he says, I called you out, I set you apart, right? It will call to them, look, yes, there were times, right, whether it was all the plagues, some of the plagues, right, that's up for debate, but there were plagues where God literally separated us from it. Yep, yeah, very good point. All right, let's go ahead and keep moving on. Let's look at Pharaoh's response to this. Somebody look at verses 25 through 32, if somebody could read that. All right, perfect. Okay. Pharaoh again relents, right, a little bit here. He says, all right, hey, I'll let you go. But what's the caveat he puts on this? Notice that. He says, I'll let you go do your sacrifices where? In the land, right? We see again, right? Pharaoh's still trying to control the situation, right? Where does God want them to go? Into the wilderness, right? He wants them to go out 3 days into the wilderness. And Pharaoh says, no, I'll let you go, but you have to stay within the land. What's Moses' response to that? No, right? Pretty much, no, yeah, no. But Moses gives a reason, right? The sacrifices we do are what to the Egyptian people? An abomination, right? This is something that they won't stand. So what are they going to want to do to us if we do these things? They're going to want to stone us. They're going to want to kill us. No, we have to go out. Yes, Randall. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right? And that's exactly what this is Pharaoh saying, all right, hey, let's come to a compromise here. Okay, you want this, I want this, we'll meet in the middle, right? You can still do this, but you have to do it within the land. And God's basic response is, I don't compromise. We don't play these games, right? How many times again in our lives, if we're applying this to us, do we sit there and say, God, if you do this, then I will do this? Right? Is that the way God works? Is God a God of compromises? No, he's not, right? I mean, really, you look throughout the whole Old Testament and even the New Testament and Jesus' teaching, he's not a God of compromises, right? Yes? Yep. Yeah. Yeah, right. It's culturally, right, we just don't mix. And so if we're going to do this, they are going to be so mad at us that they're going to want to kill us, right? It's not just a, hey, this is a new thing. No, this has been going on for hundreds of years at this point of. That's how they ended up in Goshen in the first place, was because they were shepherds, and the Egyptians, no, that's an abomination. Get them out of here. We don't want them mingled with us. Give them their own little section, and we'll be fine. What does Moses warn, though, to Pharaoh? This kind of cracks me up. What does Moses say, though? Moses says, all right, I'll go out, I'll pray, right? I'm not letting you set a time anymore. I'll go pray, but what? Don't cheat. Yeah, right? We would call it today, no takesy-backsies, right? You can't take it back, okay? Be warned. At this point, do you think Moses and God, Yahweh, right? Do you think Moses might be getting a little frustrated with Pharaoh at this point? Moses and Aaron? Yeah, they don't know the timeline, right? They just know God's going to say this, Pharaoh's going to say no, and then, right, God's going to send some plagues. By his mighty hand, he's going to do stuff to get us released, right? He's going to eventually kill the firstborn, okay? Now, whether they're thinking spiritually, physically, we don't know at that point, right? But I think Moses is kind of warning Pharaoh here, like, realize what you're doing, who you are trying to challenge, right? Who you're trying to play these compromising games with. You're not messing with just another Egyptian god. You're messing with Yahweh. You're messing with the God, the only true deity in the universe. And so he's kind of given a warning here. And so Moses then goes out, he prays, the flies go away, and again, what does Pharaoh do? Hardens his heart again, right? Again, you look at this and you're just like, man, how does he not get it? But again, like Adam said in our lesson this morning, how often do we do this? Do we sit there and say, oh no, I'm going to double down on things, right? You take it away, all right, I'm good. All right, okay, that didn't work. Now I'm going to compromise with you, God. If you do this, I'll do this. You know, these kind of games. All right, you did that. Okay, well, you know, I didn't really mean that, right? I had my fingers crossed when I said it. Yes, Colton. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right? And you see this throughout all this, you see the way Moses grows, right? At first, Moses is kind of doing the same thing Pharaoh is doing, right? Compromising, trying to be like, I really don't want to do this, right? I'm not good at speech, I'm not this. And God says, no, you're doing it, whether you want to or not, right? Here's Aaron, here's this, here's that. Go and do it. And then even after the first time, what does Moses do? God, you said this is going to work, and it didn't work, and now the people hate me, and da-da-da-da. And God says, go do it. And finally, at that time, right, we read it last week, and at the end of 6, it says, and Moses did all that the Lord had commanded. Eventually, there came a point where Moses said, you're right, you're God, I'm not. I'm just going to do what you want me to do. And we kind of parallel that to Pharaoh, right? Moses is telling Pharaoh, hey, I know how this ends up. You're not going to win, right? I didn't win. You're not going to win either. All right, thank you all very much. We'll pick up in chapter 9 on Wednesday.